Let me just say, CPS in Idaho gets it wrong over 80% of the time. They get it wrong over 80% of the time.
Hello, I'm Bill Jasper with the New American Magazine, and I am here at the raceways, the State Line Raceway on the Idaho-Washington border for the ReAwaken America Tour with General Michael Flynn, Eric Trump, and a number of other guests who we'll be interviewing here. Right now I'm in the media tent, and it's my pleasure, my honor, to introduce you to Miste Karlfeldt, and she is the executive director and founder of Health Freedom Idaho, which we'll be talking about, but she is also has her podcast, Miste for Liberty. And so, Miste, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you cover a lot of issues at Miste for Liberty, dealing with freedom and government attacks upon freedom. You're very much involved with family issues, though. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that are most dear to you that you're dealing with in your podcast.
Okay, perfect. I would say there's so many different things and so many ways they're coming after our children, right? Our children are our most precious commodity here in Idaho. And it seems clear to me that they do not want Christian conservatives raising children to be Christian conservatives in Idaho. It's an inside takeover of our state, and it's being done through our children. They want to brainwash them through the government brainwashing camps, and if they can't capture them that way, then they'll take them through CPS. So I would say to Idaho, we have to do our best job in protecting our children so that we can keep Idaho the way it was when we were children. It's slipping quickly through our fingers right now.
So you mentioned CPS, that's Child Protective Services, or Child Purloining Services or something. There have been some very notorious cases here in Idaho with regard to that. Can you just briefly touch on that and show? Because most people would think that here in Idaho, we wouldn't have that much trouble with it. Idaho is very friendly toward homeschooling. It's one of the better states, but no one is exempt, right?
Well, no one is exempt. And one of the ways that they're taking our children in Idaho, in fact, one of the top ways is through our schools. Because what a lot of people don't understand is when you take your child to a government school, the government then is the boss or the owner then of your child while you're relinquishing your rights when you drop them off. A lot of people don't understand that. So that's why CPS has an in, right, through our school system. So they go into, oftentimes it's a teacher or a counselor reporting. And you're not going to believe this. I know it doesn't sound true, but it is true. I know the dad personally. His son, they actually called CPS because his prepubescent boy was stinky. He didn't smell good. Can you imagine that? Little boys going outside and playing and then coming back in and not smelling good. The teacher took it upon herself to call CPS rather than the father. So that's one of the ways that the schools get involved in capturing our children through CPS. We're also a state where everybody reports. So it's a mandatory reporting state. So one of the families that called me, a nosy neighbor, decided that it was neglectful to let the children play outside for as long as they were, I suppose. So she called CPS and said, I believe my neighbors are neglecting their children because they play outside too much. No joke. And they did come and take all three of their children. And they fought to get them back. And it took about a year and a half to get their children back after much pain and suffering. And you know what happened? Mom and dad got a divorce. Oftentimes, CPS intervention is so traumatic, it destroys the family. So those are just a couple of the examples. I'm sure many people watching are familiar with baby Cyrus. That was absolutely absurd. I know that family well, and I can tell you, baby Cyrus is not neglected in any way. He's one of the most loved babies on the planet. His whole family adores him, grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles. Absolutely the most adored and well cared for baby. And CPS dared to get involved. And that's just a few of the examples here in Idaho. It's actually, let me just say, CPS in Idaho gets it wrong over 80% of the time. They get it wrong over 80% of the time. So after they've intervened and destroyed families and terrified children, then they give the children back after they've been traumatized and have PTSD because they get it wrong 80% of the time. I'm not saying there aren't children that are neglected, because there are. There are children that are neglected and suffering. But they get it wrong 80% of the time. And after they shred these families, traumatize children, and then give them back, are we doing more harm than good? That's what we have to ask.
It's hard to imagine as a parent, now I'm a grandparent, that happening. But I know back when my parents started homeschooling with my younger brothers and sisters, we had a large family back in the 70s. That was considered a very revolutionary act, a crazy thing to do. But homeschooling has become a mainstream issue now, and that's one of the benefits, you could say, of COVID, in that it forced many people to adopt homeschooling. So what's been your experience with homeschooling here?
Well, my children have gone to private school for a lot of years, but even with COVID, I now joined a homeschool co-op. And everybody that has a homeschool should join Homeschooling Legal Defense Fund, because they'll help you when it comes to homeschooling or CPS. Should you have CPS show up at your door, it's definitely worth the membership. I actually used to teach at a homeschool co-op before I had children. So I understand the value of homeschooling, and I'll tell you what, the homeschooled children are by and large the most intelligent, well-spoken, well-researched children I've ever met. And that's what I want my children to be.
Well-mannered.
Oh, well-mannered for sure. They make eye contact, right? They look at you when you're speaking. They are well-researched, they're well-spoken, and they always stand out, homeschooled kids. They always stand out. You can tell.
So, Misty, our viewers can watch your podcast at mistyforliberty.com. And is that a weekly podcast, or?
I haven't made it weekly yet. I kind of do it as the spirit moves me. But I do put out a voter guide. So I will be interviewing candidates as we move towards the election and putting out a voter guide. And listen, I'm very biased when it comes to being pro-liberty, okay? But there's no money or funding that's going to persuade me to put somebody else on a voter guide. It's 100% a liberty voter guide. So if you want to vote liberty, you can check out Misty for Liberty and look for the voter guide that I'll be putting up soon, and then you'll know how to vote. It's not going to be Republicans or Democrats. It's not biased in that way. It's biased for liberty. That's it.
Well, thank you very much. And you're wearing now your Misty for Liberty hat, but as we mentioned, you're also the executive director of Health Freedom Idaho, and you also have a role with Idaho Dispatch. So you're very busy and keeping Idaho and the rest of the nation well informed. Thanks so much.